Hey everybody, I was cut off a little bit suddenly by that last Uber trip, and then it's been a few hours since then. I had to do a few errands, but now I'm back. I'm just going to keep working on this line art here. Again, we are a little bit zoomed in, so I can just slowly, intricately work out this line art. I'm going to take my time. As far as making time and having a time limit on this piece, I haven't really taken the time to set a time limit. Maybe I should. But I'm pretty sure I have not gone over time yet, and I think we are working at a good pace, so I don't think it's going to be too much of a worry. Just going to be sort of adding a little bit here as I sort of discover parts of this piece that can use a little extra shading within the line art here. So I'm just doing a little bit of hatching underneath his chin and between his neck here. Maybe a little bit of a collarbone right here. Probably won't see too much of a collarbone. Probably going to see more pecs than collarbone. So we can start the pectoral muscle like kind of right there. This is going to be our tank top. Might as well put a little seam or border at the edge. Like right here. Let's kind of fix some edges right there. Keep it rough is okay. Yeah, it's okay to keep it a little bit rough. We will use some line weight here to show that there is a shadow here between the jacket and the tank top. So we're going to use a little bit stronger line weight right there. I was actually in the middle of talking about something at the very end of the last video. I was talking about One Piece, and in this video I kind of wanted to, if I have time, because I might have to leave suddenly again, but if I have time, I'll talk about kind of growing out of One Piece in a way. Now, anyone who's hearing this might be, and knows me, might be surprised, because I'm a huge, One Piece fan, and I still am. I think it's a great story. I haven't read it in quite a number of months. I was mostly following the manga. The anime is a little bit slow, a little bit awkward on the pacing. I know that when they got into the Wano arc, it started getting better, but I didn't really watch too much into it. And I've been spending a time away from One Piece and manga in general on purpose, ever since, detoxing and trying to get over previous addictions. I ended up cutting a lot of things out of my life that I felt were erroneous and didn't really, if spending direct time on it didn't serve my family, I learned over time that to slow it down. And for me, manga was a big one. I could spend hours reading manga. So with that said, I kind of forced myself to stay away from One Piece, not because I thought it was a bad story, but because for me, reading manga was a bad use of time. Unhealthy for me. But now that I've been away from it, I've discovered some things about it, and again, always diving deeper into my Catholic faith, I'd realized some things that why One Piece is great, but not like the ultimate story. Because I would often compare it to things like kind of tongue-in-cheek, like kind of sort of to offend people in a way. For example, if I was talking to a bunch of huge Harry Potter fans, and I read Harry Potter, and I really liked it. I thought it was a very good series. But I would tell people, oh, you know what? Harry Potter's really good. It's about 80% as good as One Piece, like overall. And I would just kind of troll people like that. And because, I basically just wanted people to I wanted to indoctrinate people into One Piece or whatever, just because I thought it was so good. And now, the story is so good, it kind of spreads itself. A lot of people had weird opinions of it because their introduction to it was through the 4Kids version, which, some people hold near and dear to their hearts, but I wasn't exactly a child. Well, I didn't think the art was appealing. I thought it looked weird. I thought the voices were weird. And really, 4Kids worked for Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! But it did not work for One Piece. One Piece should have been on Toonami right from the get-go, because it's more of a, even with the cartoony art style, it's more of a, the story makes more sense to a bit of an older audience, like teens or young adults. Now that said, as much as I thought it was good, there are weaknesses in the themes of the story that I only discovered by diving deeper into my religion in the recent past year. Now, why is that? I mean, obviously, One Piece is written by one guy. I mean, he's considered, one of the greatest storytellers of all time, one of the greatest fiction writers of all time. I mean, his world building is on the level, is of people like Rowling and Tolkien, like Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings or whatever. As far as like a popular fantasy world building, I would say it's like that good. I mean, there's a reason it's the best, the best-selling manga of all time. Is it? I think best-selling comic of all time. I don't remember if it surpassed Superman, but I know it surpassed Batman at one point as far as like comic sales. I think, or maybe I have it the other way around. I remember it was definitely top 3. Anyway, so what is it about One Piece that now it's not that I have a problem with it, but now I know the themes in One Piece, if you follow Luffy as a hero and follow his example, it's not going to be quite complete, right? And any of these shonen heroes, they exemplify virtue at some point in the story. And it doesn't seem like a fair comparison to compare Luffy to Jesus, right? But still, there's something here, because if people don't have some kind of a strong real life example, they might follow a fictional superhero, and a lot of times that's not going to be a bad thing. Like a superhero like Superman is awesome in that the way he's written is like he's supposed to exemplify virtue. Now Luffy in One Piece does not necessarily exemplify virtue. He exemplifies something that is very highly valued in modern society, which is freedom and autonomy. Like, the reason he wanted to become a pirate, and the reason the writer became fascinated with pirates to begin with, was that sense of freedom they got when they went out into the open seas. And suddenly, when they were out in the open seas, they no longer had to. They weren't subject to the government. The only government was like the ocean, the elements, and other rival ships. Because when you're out there, who's gonna put the rules on you? And if the government can't do it, if they're not powerful enough to do it, you can live by your own rules. And then you end up getting people like Blackbeard, in the real life Blackbeard, who become very highly reputable, but also highly feared criminals. Outlaws is one way to put it, because maybe some of these people were like not necessarily inherently evil, but outlaws in the sense that they had their own sovereignty out there in the open seas. And that's the fascinating thing about what brought Oda to write about pirates, as far as I know. And it really expresses himself in the full fruition of the character of Luffy. And we're kind of getting to some spoilers here, but his final form is like full creative expression. This is me. This is what I'm all about. And it's not that he isn't a virtuous person. Like, he loves his friends. He loves the people he considers family. And he can sense injustice, right? But that kind of thing is not his main goal. Like, his virtues come out circumstantially, but his main goal is to be free and to be the most free person in the world. And what's interesting is that the story does explore the dynamics of freedom and power and oppression. Even things like slavery and religion. It's all there in One Piece. That's why One Piece is a great story. Like I said, the world building is so deep. It's kind of hard to compare. I mean, the story's been out for like 30 years. There's not really much out there that can match the world building and the depth of world building and just the sheer creativity in One Piece, right? But if we're talking about themes, like One Piece can take those superlatives. But if I were to follow the example of Luffy I don't think that I would necessarily be hailed as a hero, at least not in a way that stands the test of time. Because right now in our society, you are hailed as a hero if you say, this is me, I'm expressing myself, this is what I'm all about. Now, in just very recent videos, I talked about why that's sort of like the sin of pride, and why it doesn't work. Because it can't be possible that, serving one's own goals, serving one's own good, one's own personal good, can be equal to the ultimate good. Maybe for some people it is. Maybe for some people, like, that's what they want in life, to be able to live in the world and exist freely. And I think for anyone who's felt, oppression, persecution, or even just, obstacles to freedom, it's such a wonderful feeling to have that liberation and be like, hey, I'm free. And if we're going back to religion here, going back to the Bible, the Jews enslaved in Egypt, the Hebrews enslaved in Egypt, that when they became free, it's like, yeah, that's the Exodus. Praise God. We are joyful for being free. This is something we've been waiting for a long time. But in the desert, once they're out there, they discover that freedom is not the ultimate good. It is a good. It's a wonderful good. And it's in fact so good that God doesn't take it away, even when we use it for our own destruction. But that's also why it isn't the ultimate good, because we can use it for our own destruction, right? So when the Jews are freed and they enter the desert, they resent God, they stray from God, they flee from God to their own demise. Many of them died, and not very many people made it to the promised land. Even Moses, who freed them, did not make it to the promised land. But they made it. They did make it. But they only made it through the ones who stayed with God. Now, obviously, it's a weird comparison, right? Comparing, this Japanese story to, the legends or the stories in the Bible, right? But is it really, even if we take a psychological look at it, like someone like Jordan Peterson does, even if we're not looking at like these things as factual history, and you just look at the themes of the story, I mean, there's a lot there. That's why these classics have stayed around for thousands of years. I mean, even if you don't believe they're true, there's something there, and that's what got someone like Jordan Peterson to like take a closer look, right? Whether or not you like Jordan Peterson, he's an influential guy. He started becoming famous through first of all, political controversy, but also through his psychological take on the meaning of the stories in the Bible. I'm not being too precise. I'm kind of just following the sketch on this, on the folds here in the pants, but I think it's going to work out okay. I think once we get into shading, we'll kind of like figure it out. I think that line art, the spirit of the line art looks cool, so we'll just keep going with it. Okay, so but yeah, is this a fair comparison? I think so, because whether or not you believe the Bible is true, there is a story there, and there are themes to it. You can take the book of Exodus as with literary value, and I'm not saying the book of Exodus on its own is better than One Piece as a whole, as a manga. If you look at it like if you're looking at it like a work of fiction, then maybe One Piece is going to be superior. But I'm trying to pinpoint right now the theme of freedom, as a good. It is not the ultimate good. The ultimate good is, well, I mean, I don't want to just blurt it out, because as a Catholic, I know what it is, but considering the topic, I want to approach it in a different way, because you can use freedom for anything. So that's the reason why the people that rival Luffy in the story are people who are, they usually start out a lot more powerful than him, And then what is it exactly that makes him more powerful than them and he wins? Well, he usually loses first, and then he comes up with some really creative expression of himself that allows him to get the victory. So if we think about Crocodile, he becomes Water Luffy. When we think about Magellan, he becomes Candle Luffy. You know, if you know the One Piece story. When we think about Kaido, he becomes obviously Gear 5th, which is a weird Tom and Jerry version of Luffy. Like, ultimate freedom is to become a cartoon, essentially. Toon power, you know? How high can you go? Greater than Goku and Superman, we can become Tom and Jerry and Popeye the Sailor Man, who can do anything, you know? So that's kind of what Luffy's power kind of looks like. It's the total free expression of self. But his rivals are doing the same thing because they're pirates, because they're outlaws. His rivals are expressing themselves freely, and they can express themselves freely as evil people. And you know, the villain Doflamingo makes a note about relativism. He says, you know, the people who win are the people who write history, and the people who are, you know, the people who are most powerful are the ones who are going to decide the fate of the world. And that in One Piece seems to be a theme that is true. And if you look at the world in a way, a lot of times it is true. And when now coming back to religion, because I'm as a Christian, we start thinking about, okay, what is the most powerful force in the world? Is it something that is, you know, militaristically, physically powerful, like powerful in the sense that dominantly powerful? Now, as a Christian, we don't think so. We think that the ultimate expression of freedom is love. It's doing what's good for others, and doing what's good for God, and doing the ultimate good, doing what's good for the greater good, not the freedom of one's expression. That's not the ultimate good, and it can't be, right? Because I talked about this in a previous video. It's not possible for it to be, because we as humans have finite wisdom, a finite length of time. So to serve my own good, if it doesn't serve, you know, the greater good even over the next generation, I mean, what good is it? It serves maybe 60 to 100 years of one person's life. And so it makes me wonder, like, you know, I don't know if I'm ever going to finish One Piece, but it makes me wonder what is Luffy, what's going to happen to Luffy in the end? Is he, like, let's say he dies, is he going to have a legacy that lasts beyond him? Right? I mean, even the legendary character in One Piece, Goldie Roger, what was the legacy that came after him? Well, the age of piracy and the age of search for treasure, and ultimately the search for One Piece among rival pirate crews becomes like this vying for power, really, and power equals freedom. That's why I can't stick with that story as the ultimate story, because for me, it no longer resonates with who I am as a person, or what I want as a person. Again, freedom is wonderful, right? There was that guy who said, "Give me liberty or give me death," right? It's an important right to have, and if one doesn't have freedom, which can be defined in a lot of ways, it can be defined as like autonomy, it can be defined as agency, it can be defined as like access to choices. You know, if one is not free, like if one is in prison, one does not have access to choices outside of that prison. You know, there's different ways we can define it or look at it. Let's see, this fold is a little bit weird. Notice how I've been pretty concentrated on the topic, and I'm still making good progress on the line art. I really can turn off my brain when it comes to line art at times. Okay, I think this is okay. Might mess with these folds a little bit, but I think they look okay. And again, putting line weight where there can be overlap or occlusion shadows. So right here between the pant legs, right here in the crease, we can put some black there. Okay, so coming back to the topic, freedom is a good that is needed, but then what do you do with it? That's where the question of One Piece keeps that question open-ended. It's like, what do you do with it? Well, if you follow the heroes of the story, they have virtues. They believe in friendship. They believe in good. They believe in protecting others. And they follow their captain, and they obey their captain. That's great. And who is the captain? So Luffy, right? And Luffy leads them all. Live out your dreams. Work hard, make them come true. Express yourself in a way that's unique to you, and that's good. That's beautiful, and again resonates very strongly with modern society. But it only approaches and doesn't reach the ultimate good, you start getting led to things like virtue, things that are beyond time and space. When I say that, I'm not trying to be like mystical in my language or whatever. I'm talking about the virtue of humility, right? When I say it goes beyond time and space, well, maybe not necessarily. If you don't believe in like anything beyond this reality, well then virtue is something that exists within time and space. But the virtue of humility does at least go on beyond one human life, one person's lived experience, one person's ambition. Because one can make it a goal to be humble, and then sure they can achieve it in their lives, and that's great. But the virtue of humility itself is a description of virtue, which manifests itself in human behavior, human attitude, human thinking. So humility is an expression of that freedom that can be used, because one can either, like, if the opposite is pride, then one can use freedom to do prideful things. One can use freedom to be humble and to act in a way that is humble. So that's where, I'm sure One Piece people might debate me on this, because there's a lot in One Piece. Like I said, I'm a fan. I'm a big fan. But the themes and the main protagonist aren't everything. And again, if we look at the main shonen protagonist, because as a consumer of manga, I was always into the mainstream shonen stuff, right? Goku, Naruto, Bleach. I tried Fairy Tail, didn't like it. But those were like the main ones, right? The mainstream Shonen Jump stories. And you follow these heroes. Now, Goku's not bad. Goku's pretty good, but he's simple. He doesn't have the virtue of intelligence, which is fine. It works for him. Naruto and Luffy noticeably do not have it either. Naruto probably being the smartest of the three over time. Goku as a character probably developed some brains near the beginning, but they kind of played into the dumbness of his character later on, especially when you get to Dragon Ball Super. But I think that's okay, because in order to express themselves as heroes, they didn't necessarily have to be smart. And I think the authors were onto something there, because it's like, okay, you can be a good, virtuous person without being a philosopher, without having high intelligence and having to understand the world. Luffy especially is great at this, because when he hears a story about like some tyrant terrorizing an entire village or an entire country, he's not interested in like the minutia of how it happened. He knows that the tyrant is in a place of power, and he's just like, okay, I just gotta beat up that guy, right? Put him in his place, and then we're good. And usually people are like, yeah, that's what you got to do. He often, like, just to play into that theme, the author will make Luffy fall asleep during the storytelling of like the history of the scenario. How this tyrant came to power. Luffy will just fall asleep during that story. He doesn't care. He knows there's a bad guy, and he knows the bad guy needs to be taken care of. And that's cool. Again, there's a lot of cool stuff in this story. And I'm not gonna be like so preachy and saying, you know what, don't read manga, read the Bible. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm expressing myself and how I've grown as a person, and kind of moved away from fiction, not because fiction is bad. You know, fiction and archetypal heroes do tell some kind of truth, but the truths that we found in these stories that I consider to be real, you know, the biblical stories and the Christian tradition, you know, Jesus, like, coming from a standpoint of faith, you know, I consider these things to be ultimate truth. And philosophers and theologians for thousands of years have been trying to approach these things. And then what happens when you approach these truths and find the truth of, at least the truth of virtue, right? The truth of something like humility before God, where for me as a Christian, that means, you know what, a lot of times it takes a succumbing of my will to the will of God, to, one might say, to the will of a higher power, or to the will of the universe. I think the universe is less accurate, a higher power is more accurate. But succumbing to that and surrendering to that is a stronger expression of freedom than, this is what I want to do, I want to express myself, this is who I am, right? Again, for some people that is the ultimate expression. But I don't think it is. I think that love, to will the good of another and act upon that will, is stronger than just being free. So to tell these stories, I could, you know, do something like what I used to be trying to do, is like write this whole, you know, try to imitate the path of, you know, of a mangaka like Oda, and just build a big world and have fun world building and designing all these characters. But and you can do a lot with that. It's a wonderful effort. You know, Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, it's worth it. But for me, you know, it didn't work out, and what's happening instead is that I'm getting paid to do well, commissions like this, but also painting murals at churches. You know, why not tell the story that's already been told, that it's a wonderful, powerful story, and I feel like people can not, I want to say gain a lot from it, but that's like extremely reductive. Of course they can gain a lot from these things, but that's not what the Christian story is about. It's not about teaching, you know, one teacher's great philosophy. It's about love and what happened during that time, and how did this person who is love come into the world, right? So that's for me what it means to grow out of One Piece. Again, not condemning it as like something bad. It's just incomplete, the themes. Again, I have so much respect for the creators of One Piece, you know, being, in my opinion, the greatest manga of all time. Some people might debate that. You know, art-wise, maybe not, I don't know. But world building, there's definitely world building, like emotional hits, storytelling, character, maybe not design, but character themes. The design is pretty good, but there's, you know, it's also a little weird and not to everyone's taste. But as far as like story and world building, one of the greats, for sure. But now it's like, rather than telling my own story, if I surrender to God, you know, my ability to make these drawings, my ability to tell a story, then it becomes his story. If I surrender to him, it becomes his story. And there's quite a lot of stories that are already there. The lives of the saints, you know, the stories of the Bible. And why not take my skill as an artist, which came from developing as someone who wanted to draw anime and comic books, why not take that to the Christian world, where, you know, some of the greatest art that's ever been made, however, it was made like in the 1400s, 1500s, 1600s, 1700s, and then something was lost. When we start getting to the Victorian era, and we start getting, you know, portraits, and we start drawing pictures of kings. Not that those things didn't happen before, but the greatest works of art before that were like really focused on God and Christianity and the story of the church. And that's how you get things like the Sistine Chapel and Notre Dame of Paris, and a whole myriad of wonderful artworks throughout the centuries. you're trying to get at something divine. And when the thing that you're making art of becomes, okay, I want to do a portrait of this king, you know, there's something really self-indulgent about it. There's something indulgent about it. And there's something off about it too. His fingertips, I want to make a little bit more pointy. These became a little bit humanoid-like, so let's just make them a little bit more fantasy-like. With the frogs have like like circular tips, so I can make the tips of the fingers pretty big and round, I guess, or pointy. But I do need to make them a little bit less human-like here. I don't want to get too much bigger than my sketch though. Gotta trust the sketch. Let's just make them pointy. See, my autopilot kicked in and I started drawing human features. I have to remember, okay, this guy's a frog. You know what? Yeah, trust the sketch. The sketch was bothering me, I guess because it didn't look human, but even here I made the thumb different. Yeah, some pointy fingers is fine. Here we get a little bit, again, less human and more froggy, so we'll get a little bit smoother curves around the palm. The commissioner did note, you know, more froggy than human-like. So, you know, I want to take that into consideration. I'm undoing a lot during the session, which is not good. But again, the flow is happening. It's happening. Here we have his beaded bracelet. So I think we're going to need an elbow like right over here. And then the beaded bracelet will start. And then I didn't draw it very well in the sketch, so I'll just kind of try to make it a little bit rough here. I think the bead should be larger here. We need to make it noticeable here, because this is a big part of his character. I guess I'm going to write it upside down. It's supposed to say daddy. I don't remember if it's Daddy Heart or if it's just daddy. I think it's just, yeah, it's just daddy. And we'll just make it fully visible with the beads coming down here. Okay. Don't know if I should bring them closer together or if this is okay. Should they be closer together? I think it makes more sense. Beaded bracelets, they should be like... Yeah, I think they will be pretty much touching. Now, those use the little block letters, but this one I guess I'll have them like... no, I guess it would make sense for them to be blocks, because if they were circles, they would kind of rotate around his wrist. Let's actually redraw this. Let's just try again. So... block letters this time, so, and have them touching. Okay. Let's bring this down a little bit more. Get some occlusion shadow between the blocks. So, I think I was able to explain my thoughts on the topic. Now, in other news, I am going to be doing another mural. So the guy who was the priest at the church that I did a mural at moved to a new parish, and talked to the other priest and showed him what my painting. And apparently the other priest had been thinking about adding a painting to his church for like several years. And turns out I'm going to be the one to make his vision come true. So as a freelance artist, a lot of your time is spent making other people's visions come true. But when it comes to the church, I am in line with these priests' visions. You know, these priests are considered my fathers. You know, I'm their son. I love to adopt myself into their families and have them be my mentors. You know, I have a father, right? I have a father-in-law. But in the church, you know, these fathers take care to be teachers, preachers, and things like that. So the family is the first line of, you know, education. But there's a second for me, and for any churchgoer, really. Family outside of your family, you find it. Let's take a look at the reference again. The daddy bracelet. Yeah, it's just touching beads. I'm gonna do round beads outside of it, and maybe I'll make them smaller to differentiate the daddy versus the other beads. So I'll make these beads a little bit smaller. Almost like rosary beads, I suppose. That's something I have experience with. So rosary beads around here. Get some occlusion shadow. Occlusion shadow. I'm just looking for parts that might need some more shadow, like right in here. Something around, you know, kind of creating some hatching lines to create some shadow between the jacket and the clothes, the shirt here. Belly button? Sure, why not? Okay. Now let's do the fist that's winding up, and then we'll do the feet. Interesting how the flow left the feet for last. The flow of how I just wandered around the whole piece doing the line art. I do want to finish this, you know, make good time on this, and then I'm gonna immediately start. You know, there's a couple pieces we can go back to, like that Saint Joseph animation, adding the stars and stripes to stars and stripes, the stars and the borders to the Lady of Guadalupe in that last commission I did. Interestingly, I got called a bigot on one of my YouTube comments. That rarely happens when I get you know, insulted like that from online people. I try to be friendly online, you know, but in this particular scenario, because the commission I got was, I knew it would be offensive to some people, and I had apprehension at first, like taking such a thing. But then I realized, okay, if this is in line with church teaching, I'll do it. And then yeah, so I got that comment. I'm like, okay, there it is. There are some people who believe that Santa Muerte is a good thing. You know, I don't want to mess with spirits. But if the church has condemned it, then I stand in line with the church. Be like, okay, it's probably not good. You know, I don't like getting into things, you know, related to superstition, and you know, I am deeply like not deeply, but like I'm religious, right? I'm Catholic. So there are some people who would tell me, well, your entire philosophy, your entire way of living is based on superstition. So how can you say that? Well, there are things we believe are true, and there are things we believe are false, and there are things we believe are good, and there are things we believe are evil. Ultimately, the best examples of good and evil are going to come from human behavior, but sometimes you get these expressions of icons and you know, demonic encounters and things like that, where it's like, okay, we're getting into some crazy territory that's beyond my understanding. And do I understand everything about the Santa Muerte? No, I absolutely not. I don't know anything about that culture. I just got the commission. I looked it up, and it seems like it's a bad thing. So I got called a bigot. That was pretty new for me. So we're almost done with the line art here. I think it looks pretty cool. Trying to see if anything looks like particularly empty. If I remove the sketch layer, yeah, it looks good to me. Yeah, I think this looks great. Jacket looks cool. Shoulders are up there. Maybe might want to bring the shoulder up a little bit. This little shoulder pad. So let's maybe bring it up. And then bring the shoulder up this way. So we have more fabric there. If ultimately all my experience as an artist just, you know, informs how well I can do Catholic artworks, then in my mind it'll be all worth it, you know. I've made bad art, like I'm not talking about like poorly crafted art, like art that kind of goes against my faith, art that's like sinful, you know. I've done that. So I feel it would be a nice little way for me to not necessarily redeem myself, but choose the Redeemer, you know, if I can make art that brings people to Him. All the while I'm drawing like someone else's imaginary character, but still, this is for me is an act of service, an act of love, you know, doing my job. You know, if you work a secular job, you're not, you know, and most people, when I say secular, that's pretty much most jobs. Not a lot of people live in or work in like church or religious environments professionally. But doing a good job, and you know, as long as you know you're not committing a terrible sin, is good. That's a good thing. So drawing this character here has been a joy so far. It's been a lot of fun. I really enjoy doing a fantasy character like this frog. The design is not that complex, but I feel like if you were to run into this guy like in a game, or like it just suddenly the frog gangster pops up, you know, frog mercenary fighter charging a punch at you and jumping at you, it would be pretty memorable, I think. So this character is actually, I think, could be pretty memorable if placed into some fantasy world. So it's cool. And again, not my design, just my interpretation of someone's description, and he said it's quite good. So we're almost done with the line art here. We can make this a long session. I can keep going, you know, keep bantering. I'm not sure when I want to take a break, but I'm just pretty much waiting until it's time to go home, because it's not time yet. Okay. So we're just doing the edges of the toes now. I've been thinking a lot about, you know, because I listen to Word on Fire, I listen to Bishop Barron, and I think a lot about, you know, the meaning of life, and just in general, I've always been kind of someone who tends to think about that. And in recent videos, I've been like trying to reel it in to move from the transcendent to the practical. I don't want to be talking philosophy all the time. Let's bring it back to the practical, to the down to earth, right? Because why would Jesus have come to earth if he didn't want us to still be, you know, down to earth? Obviously we're shooting for heaven, but heaven could be here, you know. Heaven could be a city of God built on earth. It could be a separate place. I don't really know. I'm not a theologian. But yeah, down to earth. I can feel myself getting a little bit tired, a little drowsy, and that's okay. We're still making great time in this piece, I think. We'll measure the minutes in a little bit once I finish this recording. I think once we finish the line art, which we're pretty much almost done with, I'm not sure if I'm missing anything, maybe the pec muscles here. I'm going to bring the sketch layer in and out here to see if there's anything missing. You know, neck muscles, maybe some expression of neck muscles right here might be cool. Yeah, you know, the sternocleidomastoid. Well, it is time to go. Just about done here. I'm gonna stop here because it's just about time to go. So I'll talk to you guys later. God bless. Almost done with the line art. Bye bye.